welcome to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. I'm your host, Louis Padian. I hope you're doing well and enjoying the podcast and this mini-series on protein. These podcasts are released every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to be kept up to date. Today we're going to be finishing up the short protein mini-series we've been doing over the last few episodes. I'm sure there'll be plenty of episodes in the future on things around protein or topics that include protein, but a lot of them probably need a lot more time dedicated to them and probably a whole episode. So we'll leave them for another time, and they're not as important as the stuff that we have covered in the last two and today. Wow, protein and weight loss, how much protein you need, and where are the best sources to get your protein. But by the end of today's episode, we're hopefully going to be putting that all together so you can actually put it into practice, and we'll have some options and some actual takeaways to put into practice into your life day to day. Before we go into the options, because I've covered quite a lot throughout this episode, I just wanted to preface this by saying protein isn't the only focus of these meals. There's lots of things to consider, such as fruits and veg and increasing your fiber, same with whole grain, potentially reducing your salt intake, reducing your saturated fat intake, calories if you're weight conscious or weight focused, or having that approach where you're looking to lose weight or maintain your weight or even gain weight, meal satisfaction, costs, transportability, sort of fridge life as well. All these things are really important to consider. However, today's main focus, as we don't want to mix up the message too much and take away from the general theme of protein, will be just around increasing your protein. I'll mention some bits around it that might be useful, but today we'll just be mainly focusing on increasing that protein content across these meals. This is a whole picture approach, and a lot of time I work with clients, they come to me and they're basically saying, how can I increase my protein at my breakfast or protein at lunch? And that's a great question. However, when we're looking at protein, we're looking at the overall intake across the day. And actually, it might not just be within one meal that we unlock the key to success with increasing our overall protein intake. We might be looking at across all three main meals, potentially more meals if they have more meals throughout the day, snacks as well. And all these little things add up to huge steps forward across the day and across the weeks and months. So instead of looking at one thing to change, it might be that there's potentially two or three main points that you're going to just tweak within a couple of meals or your snacks or one or two meals throughout the day. And that can have a huge increase in your protein by 10, 20, maybe even 30 or 40 grams across the day, which is massive. So don't just look for the one golden nugget. Actually think about ways that you can tweak what you're already doing so that it's not too new or you're unfamiliar with it or it's too much of a change. And actually thinking about, right, how can I take what I've already got, which is something that I enjoy and I love having, and adding a little bit more to it. And that will make it more sustainable over the long term and something that you're probably going to enjoy more as well. So the way that we're going to approach this would be looking at the three main meals, breakfast, lunch and dinner, and then also potentially some snack options for you. And ways that I've approached this as well with clients is that there's usually general trends or different ways that people tend to have their breakfast, and I've categorized them. So we'll focus on each one and we'll move through. So a common one that people have will be cereal. And cereal is usually one that is quite low in protein. It's usually a good opportunity to really boost that overall protein intake throughout the day. And as we've said in the previous episodes, that it'll help with fullness, potentially help with snacking later on, especially if you're looking to manage or lose weight over the next couple of weeks or months. So adding that protein can be really beneficial, as well as sort of recovery from exercise and general health and well-being. Options that I personally like to include, and a lot of my clients like to include, would be an overnight oats option. It's simple, it's time efficient, it's often really tasty, some really good recipes, and I'll tell you more about that later on. But simple ways to increase that protein within just making overnight oats or even just your cereal in general would be adding whey as one of the sort of most protein dense options that we have that's really affordable as well. Potentially adding things like chia seeds, especially if you're doing overnight as well, they really soak up and have a lot of creaminess and sort of texture to breakfast as well. And even just if you're having a yogurt option or having milk and want to swap for yogurt, adding Greek yogurt instead or a skyr, as they tend to be higher in protein and lower in calories, which again, for people who are more calorie conscious, could be a good option. Other additions that you might want to throw in there for added texture and taste would be nuts and seeds. But with this, especially with nuts, being aware that adding a lot of them could add a lot of calories, which potentially is something that you might want to either limit or avoid. The key thing with this calorie conscious approach to breakfast would be, instead of looking at it as an individual, as I've said, instead of looking at the one part, to look at the whole picture. So potentially, or something that I often see with clients or people that I'm working with, would be that they're trying to lose weight and they're reducing their calories at their breakfast and trying to reduce them as much as they can, when actually a way that could be counterintuitive would be to increase the calories at their breakfast, so actually it helps them manage their intake throughout the day a bit better, because common trend is having as little calories as they can at breakfast, potentially doing that at lunch, and they end up overeating in the afternoon or even in the evening. And that's potentially because they're too hungry. Adding protein at the breakfast or even additional calories at breakfast allows them to feel more satisfied and full, and helps them manage their hunger a lot better throughout the day. So it's counterintuitive, and I know I've mentioned in the previous episode as well, but instead of looking at how low can I go, actually having a look at how best can I manage my hunger throughout the day to hit my calorie goals might be a better approach. Another option that people turn to, and it's mainly down to marketing, would be higher protein cereals. Often these can be a bit misleading, so in my opinion, the best thing to do is ignore all the marketing claims on the front, ignore what they want to tell you, and actually look at what they have to tell you. And what they have to tell you is all the nutritional information on the back. Per 100 grams, usually what they have to tell you regardless. They might do it in per 100 grams and per serving size as well. So what we're looking for there is, if we can get between 3 to 10 grams protein per serving of that breakfast, that's a huge win. Obviously within your budget, because a lot of these marketed as high protein cereals will fall within that range, but they'll probably be a lot more expensive. Things that do fall into that range are standard bran flakes and oats as well. There are lots of other additional benefits to these cereals, such as oats and bran flakes, the whole grains, that can't be overlooked. So again, choosing what fits right for you, your budget, your preference is super important here. So don't be thinking that I have to disregard all of that, I have to disregard my price range, my budget, in order to get the most protein. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, considering all these things, how can I get a little bit more protein whilst also ensuring that I enjoy it, that it's easy and feasible for me, that's affordable, and it aligns with my values and goals. So those are some easy ways to increase the amount of protein at your cereal breakfast. Another alternative for people would be sort of toast that I see in the morning. And again, simple options like swapping for a whole grain might help with fullness, but potentially not help with protein too much. There are stuff like high protein breads or wraps, which we'll cover in a minute, but easier ways to increase the amount of protein at your breakfast could be a high protein spread to put on there. And one of my favorites would have been the My Protein sort of powdered peanut butter. We've add a little bit of water. It's a really high, low fat spread that you can put on there. It's not the same as normal peanut butter. It isn't going to be that because it hasn't got the fat in there that makes it taste so damn good, but it's a good alternative. Other ones might be adding some eggs, maybe if you want some fish on there, such as salmon, sardines, or kippers. They can be great sources of protein and also your omega-3s. If you want to sort of disregard the toast or have that as more of a side, having something like an omelette, or an example would be a spicy sort of Moroccan beans and lentils sort of omelette, or with some chickpeas in there. Not only are you getting a huge amount of protein from the eggs, but the beans, lentils, and chickpeas will add a lot of texture, flavour, and taste and protein to the meal as well. As I mentioned before, the high protein wraps or bread can be useful. There's a great option that I've actually done. It can work at breakfast if you're having flatbreads and things, but I've used it with curries previously. It was just a simple and easy way to make a wrap, essentially, which was just some low-fat Greek yogurt and some flour, mixing it in a 1-to-1 ratio, so 100 grams and 100 grams, potentially a little bit of water to add to the texture as well. Just make sure you get it, make it into a nice dough. It is a bit harder to deal with, especially as I'm gluten-free. The gluten-free wraps don't hold as well, but if you're using regular flour, it should work fine. Roll it out, chuck it in a pan, chuck it in the oven, and you've got a nice, easy 2-ingredient flatbread wrap there for you to use as well, which is high in protein. Again, something to consider as well. But if we're getting back to the protein examples, you can get ready-made high-protein wraps or bread. Potentially could be useful if that fits your budget and preference, or even just swap into a whole grain, as I said, that can help with that fullness and sort of nutrient density. There's lots of different things that you could swap and change there. Again, take what you need or what you prefer, give it a try, and see and how you can adjust it to suit your goals. Last of all, on the breakfast front, I often see people just go for that light breakfast or no breakfast. They might even just have a coffee and manage. That can be helpful for some people, that they're not hungry in the morning, they're not a breakfast type, or they don't have an appetite in the morning, and even the thought of having breakfast makes them feel unwell or even sick. So again, just making that into having a quick shake alongside it, or a yogurt on the go, or even a protein bar to go with that, can just add that little bit of protein to help with that hunger. There's a lot to delve into here, because some people do this as something that they feel will help them lose weight. So they might go to the gym in the morning and they might feel that training fasted might help with that, which isn't the case at all. Some people might find it useful, but you don't need to do that in order to lose weight. So if you're someone that prefers to have breakfast and you're currently doing this, then even just having something that's a little bit high in protein to help manage that can help tide you over to lunchtime whilst keeping your calories low in the morning. But like I said, that can trip you up further down the line with managing your hunger throughout the day, because as you get to the early afternoon, you probably had the equivalent of one meal and your body's sort of telling you, right, we need to get some more food on. So that's all the breakfast options. There's plenty of things to choose from there, and take what you need, as I've said, and we'll move on to lunch now. So now we're on to lunch. One of the most common lunches that I see would be a typical sandwich and wrap. With this, I'm not going to say that you need to stop having sandwiches, because it's a quick, easy, cheap way to get through your lunch. It usually holds up pretty well if you're taking it into work, and it can be really nutritious and really healthful. And sandwiches aren't a problem in my books at all. However, it's what between the bread, or what is between the bread, can be improved, in my opinion. So making sure that we've got a good protein source in there. Common ones: tuna, salmon, chicken, egg, beef, corn, beans, lentils, chickpeas. Adding stuff in there, especially if you've got a wrap as well, you can really add a lot more flavour and texture to there, as it holds up a little bit better. Nuts and seeds can be thrown in there as well. Again, just being aware that they might add a lot more calories, but they add a huge dimension with texture and flavour as well. Like I've said, you could easily make that high protein wrap with the Greek yogurt and flour, and again, that can add a huge amount of protein to that meal and add to that fullness and satisfaction from it as well. Like I said, we're not going to concentrate on all the other things that we could do here, such as adding fruits and vegetables in, because they add a huge dimension with regards to nutrient density or sort of nutrients in general. So we don't want to disregard that. However, we'd be here all day if we got into the ins and outs of every single meal and these different options. These are just about increasing your protein. Another common option for lunch would be a soup for someone. So things that you could do in there is add some cheese. Common one that I used to have would be a tomato soup with a cheese sandwich that you can dip in there with a sort of low-fat mozzarella potentially, and that tastes amazing in my book. But it can really add a lot of protein in there as well. Just add some cheese and some bread in there to add to the texture, flavour and taste. You've got a little bit of creaminess in there to add to the soup. You've got some sweetness from the bread. It really matches it really well. Other things that you can add in there: beans, lentils. You can add potentially some light cream, or even if you're having something like a chicken soup or a bolognese, a pot of bolognese technically is like a soup. Again, add fruits and vegetables in there. Again, they'll have a little bit of protein, but won't add huge amounts, but add plenty of other good stuff as well. Or you can just add some bread to help dip in there. Again, the high protein bread could be a really good option. Last but not least, we've got salads. Salads tend to be a bit low in complex carbohydrates, or carbohydrates in general. Tend to be really high in like high fiber foods. You've got your lettuce, you've got tomatoes, cucumbers potentially in there. But adding a protein source in there can add to the fullness factor from it, and also the taste factor as well, really improving the satisfaction from that meal. Common ones: tuna, salmon, chicken, egg, beef, corn, beans, lentils. Again, all of these things can really add a huge amount of nutrition and protein to the meal. And if you want, there's options to add high protein or higher protein carbohydrate sources as well. So plenty of options there to improve or increase the amount of protein that you're having: sandwiches, soups or salads. Next up, we have dinner or tea, depending whereabouts you're from. First of all, we've got a common one around spag bowl. With dinner options, there's usually a protein source in there for a lot of people. So for spag bowl, for example, people will be having minced meat or minced beef in there. Having a leaner source of mince in there, again, I'm aware that this is probably more expensive. One, will reduce the amount of saturated fat at that meal, which is beneficial for cardiovascular disease, but will improve or increase the amount of protein per 100 grams as well. So that's something to consider. Affordability wise, one of the things that I used to use would be corn mince, which is sort of a micro protein, we'd call it. Again, really good on protein per serving, not as good as mince, but really low in saturated fat and plant-based as well, so potentially a bit better environmentally. With that, you want to add some kidney beans in there, or potentially lentils to add a bit more fibre, but also protein to help with that fullness. There's options at pasta dishes in particular. There's been a huge step forward in almost legume-based carbohydrate sources, that quinoa spaghetti or pasta, or lentil pasta and spaghetti. And I've seen these available in Aldi. I've used them myself. Texture-wise, they take a bit more fine-tuning. They potentially can be overcooked quite easily, but they add heaps of protein to your meal. So we're talking 3 or 4 times the amount of protein that you get from normal spaghetti. And that's something potentially worth considering, because that could add an extra 8, 9, 10 grams maybe of protein throughout the day, just by making that simple swap in there. And if we're doing that 3 times a day across our breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and 10 grams, there's 30 grams extra protein per day, which can make a huge difference to us managing our food better, but also recovering from exercise and helping with weight loss as well. So something to consider there. Curries tend to be something that's quite popular. Again, high in protein. Again, leaner options with those protein sources. We're looking at chicken instead of going for a chicken thigh, going for a chicken breast, going for beef, potentially going for more of a tenderloin. Same with pork as well, going for tenderloin, really lean compared to other options like belly. So choosing those leaner options will potentially be more expensive, but increase the amount of protein, reduce the amount of saturated fat that you're getting in your diet, which is going to improve overall health. Potentially fish, this can come in. A white fish option for your curry could be really helpful, and adding your lentils and beans in here can really, really boost that protein as well. Good to combine these options and really experiment with them for your satisfaction, texture and taste, and also price, and seeing what's going to work best for you moving forward. Last up in the dinner section, we have stir fries. This is a sort of go-to option for a lot of people if they're being a bit more calorie conscious or managing their weight. Full of nutrition, full of fiber, full of lots of various nutrients, and quite diverse in texture and taste, which are all fantastic. Adding in potentially leaner options could be beneficial, around sort of lean beef, chicken, maybe in some nuts and seeds in there to add a bit more crunch to it. And again, same with the pasta options. There's high protein noodles again that you can add in there if you want to. Just a note on the leaner protein sources. This is me coming in from a health perspective, but also a part of that becomes satisfaction. And potentially having a higher fat cut of meat could make the meal more satisfying. Therefore, you eat less overall of the food because you're feeling more satisfied. That's something to consider as well and play around with. So you might want to mix it up and go chicken breast and chicken thigh, or going with a sort of normal 20% diced pork to a tenderloin that you're going to cut up yourself. Different options can have different outcomes with regards to how you feel about the meal, your hunger levels, and how you manage them, and also how much you enjoy them. So I'm not saying that you should always go low fat, because it obviously doesn't taste as nice in my opinion, but it might be worth considering occasionally having those higher fat meals just to help manage that portion and that satisfaction level out of the meal as well. Last but not least, we have snacks and potentially desserts as well. So a simple one here would be chocolate bars, and a simple swap would be a protein bar. They tend to be maybe even twice the price now, but you'll probably find that you're a lot fuller from them. There's lots of different varieties of protein bars. They all have their pros and cons. But for me, if there's an option there and they can have it, I tend to go for a protein bar. The reason I say this is that protein bars probably won't have a huge amount of protein in them. Some of them do, some of them have 20 grams of protein, which is fantastic. But a lot of them might only have 10, 12 grams. You shouldn't be getting you shouldn't be aiming to get a full serving from your protein bars, in my opinion. They're an additional snack throughout the day, or adding on to the end of a meal to just bump up that protein. The reason I say this is because we've got 3 great opportunities throughout the day where, if we're hitting those 3 servings of protein, we're getting 25 to 40 grams of protein within that meal, then we don't really need an additional serving of 25 to 40 grams. We don't need it. It could help, but it's not an essential. If you're not hitting those 3 areas, then protein bars probably shouldn't be a focus for you. I think it's about trying to get the most out of our main meals. If we're finding that we're craving some chocolate, you might find that a protein bar is a more preferred or a more considered approach, rather than having that you might feel more satisfied. But there's a cost element there. Potentially, some people don't like the texture and taste. That's completely fine. I don't mind them, but it's all about finding what works for you. But that's an option there. If you've had some chocolate, there are options out there for protein bars. If you're looking for a sweet option, obviously you can have the fruit and mix with some yogurt, having that in there. That can be really good sweet too, especially before bed. There's options around protein baked goods, there's protein cookies, I said protein bars, but there's lots of recipes out there to make your own sort of blueberry muffins and things like that, or mug cakes, which can have a huge amount of protein in them. So there are plenty of options out there, and I'll be giving you a link to them at the end of this episode. If we're looking for more savoury options, there's things like cooked meats, there's packs of nuts. Again, being considerate around the protein versus calorie content, and being aware that more protein doesn't always mean that it's going to be better for weight loss, because we've got to consider calories in there and obviously preference and price as well. So having options that suit your taste buds and your preferences, and having diverse options to go for, can be really useful in managing your food choices a lot better. Just wanted to throw in an additional option here of cottage cheese. It's a bit of a niche option. I don't particularly like it. It's great for protein. Some people like it as a bit of a dip, and can be great with sort of crackers and breadsticks. But personally, it's not something that I like or often give to clients, because it can be quite a particular taste for people. But it is a great option if you prefer it as something that's got high protein content, very low in calories, can be quite voluminous as well, and pair up with things like crackers and breadsticks if that's sort of a snack that you go to currently. So there we have it. We've covered breakfast, lunch and dinner, and a few snack options there, and taking what's going to work for you and tweaking it is probably the best way to go forward with this. So starting where you're at, meeting yourself where you're at, rather than trying to implement brand new things that are going to inspire you, things that you're going to be looking forward to, and trialing them out and tweaking them to work for you. I have got some recipes for you that I've used that you can download. So if you click the link in my bio on my Instagram, which is at Louis Padian Nutrition, which is at LOUISPADIAN Nutrition, or click the link below, you can download the recipe pack for 3 high protein days of high protein recipes, and check them out, enjoy them, let me know how you find it. So there you have it. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. If you have any questions, queries, or would like to reach out to me, please do. I am at Louis Padian Nutrition, which is at LOUISPADIAN Nutrition on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and all social media platforms. If you're looking for support in achieving your goals and living a healthier, happier, and more balanced life in the process, please click the link below and inquire about working with me. But for now, I'll catch you on the next episode.